Okay, well, thanks for joining us, guys. So just quickly, we've got, something like 15 minutes. You've got 1 minute each to tell us a bit about your firms and what it is that you do. Philippe, if you'd like to start.
Hello, good evening. I am the managing partner of Partech Ventures. What we basically do, we manage several funds. Up to now, we are managing funds that were transatlantic funds investing in California and Europe. And we recently launched a new initiative. We launched the first Pan-African VC firm. We did the first close in December 2017, but I'm thinking we'll come back to that.
David?
Yeah, my name is David Goldberg. I'm the CEO of Founders Pledge. Founders Pledge is a charity that I set up that works with entrepreneurs, and we help founders, investors, and VCs to give back by asking them to pledge a percentage of their exit proceeds to charity when they've actually made money. So we're trying to get entrepreneurs to think about what the future might hold for them philanthropically and start to make this commitment to give back straight away.
Okay. So, I mean, founders aren't, billionaires, at least not to begin with. They're not fat cats or people that, people might expect or want to give charity and sharing this way. Why are you picking on entrepreneurs, or selecting entrepreneurs rather than going for the CEOs of major companies who are also incredibly wealthy, and they're wealthy already, they've got the money?
Really good question. So we picked founders and startup founders for a couple of reasons. We're asking founders of private companies to commit to give when they're going to have a significant liquidity event. So the startup sector tends to have faster liquidity at much larger amounts than sort of larger businesses do with their profits. And I guess more importantly, it's about the way that entrepreneurs think, the way they use data, the way they try to quantify and understand and iterate around problems and solutions. And the thinking was that if we can get a really smart group of entrepreneurs thinking about the world in a more quantitative way, the way they do their businesses, think about their charity quantitatively, then we could influence the way they give in a really positive way that skews towards higher impact as opposed to higher emotional satisfaction. So all else equal, I'd rather see more impact than more catharsis.
And Philippe, you've worked with dozens of founders. You sit on the board of 8 startups, if your website is up to date. Is there something unique about founders that means that they should give more or be more inclined to do so?
Well, first, there is a new trend in Europe for years with a high level of taxation rates. A lot of people didn't feel obliged or even didn't think of giving. I think it's changing a lot. It's changing for several reasons. First, we begin to have real success. Then I think, for once, the US have really shown the way. The trends came from the US, and I see more and more founders that wants to give. For example, with our African initiative, we had several of our former founders that came to see us and says, okay, we think that this initiative is very important for Africa. We are going, some of that, we commit 1 million to your fund because we think it's very, very important.
But ultimately, this is more like an impact investment. It's not a charity. They're looking for the return as well as doing good at the same time.
Frankly, these founders, they are doing that. Well, you can't say they are not. It's not important. The returns are not important to them. But they are not doing that for the returns. They are really doing that for the impact.
Okay, David, what's the biggest amount anyone's ended up donating so far?
Donating so far or pledging?
Well, pledging and then ultimately...
So the founder of WeWork is pledged, and 2% of his stake in WeWork is quite a bit of money.
On paper.
On paper and according to SoftBank and a couple of other people. We have a couple of the early Uber executives who've pledged and are just now starting to fulfill with a recent secondary. But the biggest near-term pledge was one of the early investors in Supercell, who's made a pretty significant contribution as a result of his success.
I suppose what I was just leading up to, do you ever get kind of pledger's remorse? You know, someone that says, I want to give, the minimum is 2%, they want to give, 4%, okay, and then they see just how much money they're going to get, and they just think, you know what, I don't really want to give you that much.
We've not yet. We've actually seen people do the exact opposite, which is increase their donation. So there's a couple of reasons why founders increase their donation. I'd like to think it's a understanding how much wealth they have and how little 2, 4, 5, 10% is in proportion to the many millions. Perhaps more likely is there's a tax optimal amount to give in everyone's specific situation, and usually that's more than 2%. We also encourage people to think outside of their comfort zones because, there's a diminishing marginal utility when it comes to happiness with money. And you can only have so much and use it productively and be happy in your life until you sort of hit like Pareto optimal, and it's just sort of not fun after then, or not as fun. So, we're encouraging people to really sort of see what a couple of $1 million will mean to them, or what it'll mean to people in another part of the world where it's life-changing.
So, Philippe, I was planning to put you on the spot here and just ask you because you allow VCs to take pledges as well.
Absolutely.
I was going to ask you on stage if you'd be prepared to do that, but you're actually already doing that with the company that kind of receives the income from your fund.
Exactly. In addition to what we do for Africa, we decided to give to African non-profits a part of our profit in the management company. We do that directly. We do that on it's a small percentage of our yearly profit.
It was 5%, was it? You said?
Yeah, up to 5%.
I'm sorry, is this just for the Africa fund or all of the funds?
No, that's not for CF. That's the profit of the management company, but we direct that only to African charities.
Okay. Would you be more inclined to invest in a startup where the founder, whether it's with Founders Pledge or someone else, has already said, you know what, I need this amount of money, I think we're going to be this big, and I can tell you as well that, all being well, if we succeed and we're going to make this money, I'm going to give, X amount to charity. Would you be more inclined to invest in that person, all things being equal, in terms of the viability of the startup? Would you be more inclined to invest in one where the founder has got this notion that they want to give back when they have payday?
Frankly, absolutely not.
Okay.
It shouldn't be a criteria. I think we shouldn't. I think in my position, I shouldn't confuse my personal taste, personal inclination with the business. I think what we see still is that the more successful, the more they give, the founders. But in fact, that's a correlation to success. But I should not take that into account when deciding on an investment.
Okay. And David, presumably you have some restrictions on the kind of company that would donate. What's the worst response you've got from maybe speaking to someone and said, hey, you're doing great. We see that you really ought to make a pledge, and this way you can do all this good. What's the worst kind of response you've had to that?
Someone who said, no, I don't want to make a pledge?
Perhaps impolitely.
People aren't really impolite. I mean, we're doing something that's net positive for the world. It's completely free. So we don't have a horse in the race financially. We exist to help entrepreneurs give back. And so most people that I talk to tend to get that, even if they're not interested in being involved directly. The reasons we get are, I haven't made it yet, and why should I be thinking about giving stuff away that I don't have? Which I think is fair on the face, but when you dig into it, it really is quite a powerful statement to say, if something happens in the future, then I'm going to give a big chunk away to something that I'm passionate about. The other response we get is, philanthropy is really private, it's really personal, and I don't want to do this publicly. And I can appreciate that. And Founders Pledge allows pledgers to commit to our initiative and join our community, come to our events, use all of our research and resources without being public about it. We really are about building coordination amongst entrepreneurs who are interested in making the world better.
And Philippe, the kind of counter, you said you're indifferent as to whether the founder is going to plans to give any big windfall to charity or not. But by the same token, would you rather the founder? I mean, the founder's got a lot to worry about. They're running a company. They're trying to raise funds. They're trying to get their product to market. They're trying to please you guys as well to make sure that they're kind of hitting all of their targets. Would you rather they were not distracted by someone like David and Founders Pledge, and that they could just get on with the business of running their firm, of building their company, and then at the end of the day, then you can say when they've made good that, hey, maybe you want to think about this?
No, but I think it's really an excellent initiative. What we see still is that some of founders, they do one or two successful companies, and what they do really, some of them that I know, they really start non-profit businesses. What I find very interesting, they manage this as almost as profit businesses, but as non-profit.
That's how I run Founders Pledge.
Exactly what you.
Yeah. As someone who had sold a business and wanted to see better efficiency in charity, I run Founders Pledge, which is a charity in Germany, in the UK, and in the US like a business. And we optimize not for capital, but for impact.
And does Founders Pledge predate the kind of the giving pledge, the Warren Buffett, Bill and Melinda Gates, or was it kind of inspired by that?
It takes cues from the giving pledge. I mean, you're talking about people who can give away 99% of their net wealth and still have hundreds of millions of dollars. So I absolutely appreciate that the billionaires of the world are committing to give 50%, but it's sort of at a different level.
Well, I want to pick up on that point because, sure, I mean, if you've still got hundreds of millions after giving away billions, it's more than enough ivory back scratchers that you can afford. But your minimum is 2%. You say your average is 4%, is that right?
5% now.
5%. Aren't you setting the bar a bit low? I mean, shouldn't you really kind of be going in there? Imagine the good that you could do if you maybe set the minimum for 10%. I mean, that's the kind of...
Absolutely. I stress tested the percentage when we were starting, and I started at 5%. And the kind of reaction I got across the board was, this is crazy. How could you ask me to give away 5% of my holding in the company? This is like my child. I couldn't even consider it. And 1% is not enough, and so 2% seemed like the right number. And we were anchoring people at 2% for the first year, and then we stopped using 2%. Now I'm reinforcing it here. But really, 5%, 10% is still sort of not enough, really, when you think about it. And you think about the kinds of wealth that entrepreneurs here in France and in the developed world have, the places they're born into, the education they have access to, the amount of finance that they can raise. These are the luckiest people on the planet, the 1% of the 1%. And if they're not doing more than the average person, if they're not giving, then who's going to?
But I mean, can you tier this so like, okay, if you make up to 10 million, you'll give 2%?
We have a ratcheted pledge as well.
You do have
it's very difficult to message publicly. So when people reach out to us, we sort of build a pledge according to their circumstances.
Okay, and in case anyone wasn't clear, it is legally binding. You can't even reduce the amount. You can't change it. If you pledge 4%, that's it. And you haven't had to chase anyone
Never.
to date.
No,
okay.
no. So you can always raise the amount. You just can't lower it.
Okay, and Philippe, it's a similar question to you. When it comes, it's 5% is the figure that you've gone for. Do you feel that maybe you ought to be making that higher, and that other VCs ought to follow suit?
Well,
the answer is yes.
The answer is maybe. What we are doing as well is because we have been asked to do that. We are teaching charities to fundraise.
Teaching charities to
fundraise. Because basically a successful VC is also a fundraising machine, and we have a lot of charities that came to us and they're asking, we don't want that. Giving us money is nice. Teaching us how to fundraise is a huge leverage for us, and we are trying to organize fundraising meetings for them.
But investing directly in non-profits, that's not something that you're, like investment from the fund's perspective, that's not something you'd be looking to do.
That's something that we can't do.
Right.
Legally, we can't do it.
David, you had something to add there?
Yeah, so I mean, I like the analogy. You give a man a fish he eats for a day, you teach a man to fish he eats for a lifetime. We try to go one step further, and we want to teach a man how to build a fishing kit so that he can go teach other people how to build fishing kits and then teach them how to fish, and it becomes system-level change as opposed to top-level change. And it's really about understanding how we can create impact in the most scalable, impactful way, and then spreading that as widely as possible. And this perspective seems to be working. I mean, so we started 3 years ago with an audacious mission. We now have 1,200 pledges in 30 countries. We've raised $420 million for charity in that time. We've seen 29 exits. And we're growing faster than we can keep up with, if I'm perfectly frank. And really trying to focus on how we deliver value as opposed to just how we deliver signal. Okay.
Well, I think everyone in the audience will agree that it's incredibly great things that you're doing at Founders Pledge, incredibly worthy and should be applauded. And long may everyone pledge that. And likewise, Philippe, the fact that 5% of your profits in your management company are going to charity, I think is something that many in the industry who don't always have the best reputation, let's face it, should look to follow suit. If not publicly, then privately. But thank you very much to our guests, David and Philippe.